Good to have you back on Atlantic Television Network Blowout, and it's time for Anchor's Chat. So, the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission warns against sexual harassment and lists it as corrupt practices that attract not less than 7 years prison term. Speaking at a one-day sensitization workshop on sexual harassment in tertiary institutions in Abuja on Thursday, ICPC Secretary Mr. Clifford Oparodum, who gave the warning, said sexual harassment is a form of corruption. It is a deviation from the norm for an official to use his, her, or her office or position to demand, receive, obtain, or attempt to obtain any form of sexual gratification for him to perform his duties. I said ideally, official duties ought to be carried out with integrity, good conscience, and diligence without the expectation of any unlawful benefit. So he says Section 2, Subsection F of the ICPC Act states that gratification includes any service or favor of any description. Section 8 of the ICPC Act says any person who corruptly asks for, receives, or obtains any property or benefit of any kind for himself, or any person is guilty of an offense or of official corruption and is liable to imprisonment for 7 years. It is pertinent to note that unlawful benefits are not always pecuniary, and it is disheartening that sexual gratification has become a form of illegal tender in many institutions. Staff members have been found to use their office to demand sexual benefit from other staff and students in exchange for good grades or other favors. He said this is in order to avoid debt circumstances and denial of benefits to which they may ordinarily even be entitled to. The culture of silence has always allowed the sexual harassment thrive, but ICPC is working relentlessly to ensure that with sensitization and appropriate policy implementation, this culture would gradually change. Okay, I love this conversation, and I honestly think that it's about time we begin to push for this kind of conversation. I was having a conversation with a business owner some time ago, and I asked him, what is your company's sexual harassment policy? And he said, there is one. I said, okay, are your staff aware that there's something called sexual harassment that shouldn't be found in the workplace? You know, we're talking about university, we're talking about what there's the university is the workplace, but where students are involved, where people that may be in vulnerable situation as a result of their state in life, their age, and of course, what they are doing in that organization, those are the lower cadre. But those at the higher cadre too can also be found, can also be harassed by anyone. So sexual harassment policy, as a matter of fact, is something that should be binding on every organization. I hope that the ICPC will not just stop at making it a policy and sensitization, but they cannot begin to push for this to be a policy that a part of labor policy or labor laws in this country from the National Assembly. Push for the bill, find a way around it to ensure that organizations, people, individuals who find themselves in situations where it becomes apparent that they want to find a way to manipulate the system by offering themselves or demanding for sex, offering sex or demanding for sex, that this becomes a thing of the past. Now that ICPC is saying that this sexual harassment has been identified or listed as corrupt practices in Nigeria, I hope to whom it may concern. You know how a little girl who is a core member, for instance, serving an organization, finds her way working with you, and every time you touch her inadvertently, let me just say this real quick. Sexual harassment is not limited to actual sex. Sexual harassment is actually, it begins with abuse of, inordinate touch. Having to touch someone inordinately, having to hold someone inordinately, having to do certain things without the person's permission. And as a matter of fact, when this happens in the university, in school, or in the workplace, it's usually looked at as, but even at home, these things happen. Where an uncle comes and flips his people. They are not. I'm not comfortable with strangers. People